I'm hoping this works. This would be my fifth attempt. So, I'm getting kind of tired of hearing myself talk about this. So, a bunch of you have had questions about the Westlaw workshops, and in particular, the question asking you to find an ALR annotation from a specific time period regarding pretrial publicity. Excuse me. So, I came up with my own idea for a search for an ALR for a time period on a different subject that I thought I could go through and you could glean from it some of the steps that you should take to complete that particular question. So, to search for an ALR, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what kind of legal source is an ALR? Well, it's not a case, it's not a statute, it's not a constitutional provision, and it's not an administrative regulation. So we know it's not a primary source of law. We do know, however, it's a secondary source of law. So on our main Westlaw screen, you see here secondary sources. So click it on. And then we're brought to a screen that shows us all the different varieties of secondary sources we can research on Westlaw. We know we want to find an ALR annotation, and ALR stands for American Law Reports. Okay, we learned about those when we were looking at chapters 1 through 4. So we click on American Law Reports, and it's going to bring us to its specific database. Now, for these purposes, I'm not interested in any of these particular areas of law. I'm just going to do a straight up search within the American Law Reports. But, big but here. I want to search, so my issue that I'm looking up is I want to find an ALR annotation between the years 2014 and 2018 that deals with any kind of legal protections given in a domestic violence situation between a same-sex relationship. Okay? Now, the years 2014 to 2018 were very significant from a United States constitutional law perspective because in 2015 we had the Windsor case, followed by Obergefell v. Hodges, and so the first struck down the Defense of Marriage Act, which was the acronym DOMA, and the second legalized same-sex marriage. So that particular time frame, I imagine, will be filled with lots of different helpful secondary source tools to help me get perhaps to any primary source that I want. So I'm in the right place. Now I need to filter out the time frame. So much like I've said before, the filtering function, right? It's sort of akin to when we do our online shopping, right? We like to filter out what color, what brand, what size, what shape, blah, blah, blah. Just apply that kind of logic here to Westlaw. So advanced, right here, to the right of the regular search query, is advanced. So click it on. And you will find this menu of all sorts of filters you can use, these connectors and expanders. God bless you if you understand that and want to use them from now on till forever in your Westlaw searches. They are not my cup of tea. But what is, I think, very helpful in this advanced screen is date. You can filter out your search query by date. So this drop-down menu gives you all sorts of selections, as you see. You want something within the last 3 years. You want something within the last 6 months. All dates after a specific date. And then date range, which is what we want. So for me, my date range is 2014 to 2018. Yours is different, of course. And I hit OK. Now, up in the search query, it is automatically built into the search that anything that is going to come up from this, clicking search, will be within these dates, these years. So now I can just do a natural language search that encapsulates this time restriction. So I'm going to put legal problems, domestic violence, same-sex relationships, and that sounds good. So then I'm going to hit search and see what happens. Okay, we don't need to do that right now. And let's see what the search reveals. Waiting with bated breath. Okay. 10,000 annotations answered this search query. So, as you see, there's a lot out there, right, during this time period. And of course, some of these are even older, but the top ones, oh my God, I'm still getting messages on my screen. It never ends. Okay. So, the very first document that the search picked up looks just what I want, right? Legal protection against domestic violence and same-sex relationships, dated 2016, so it falls within that time period. So I'm going to click on that and give you a little brief overview of what an ALR annotation looks like and means. So if I were going to summarize this in terms of title, author, etc., this and that, I would look here because every annotation has an author. The author of this one is George L. Blum. I wouldn't worry about the JD. That just means that Mr. Blum received his Juris Doctor degree and he is, went to law school. So George L. Blum wrote an ALR titled Legal Protection Against Domestic Violence in Same-Sex Relationships. That annotation was published in Volume 19 of the ALR 7th. That means sort of like when we talk about case reporters having their series, the ALR has many of its, series, we'll call it. Article 1, published in 2016. So that's the info in terms of who wrote it, what it's called, when it was published, in what was it published. And then, it gives you a very brief overview of what the annotation will be about. And like all ALRs, it has this table of contents, which is helpful. The article outline is super helpful for somebody at the early stages. Reading about the scope of the annotation, the background and summary of the annotation would be my first steps in reviewing this ALR and making the determination you're always making when researching, which is, yeah, this is good, but this isn't really touching upon what I need. I got to move on. Or I do think this is touching upon what I need, but I do need to just read further. It's never just a brief, okay, looks great, done. It requires, deeper digging. So you'd go through that, these ones, at least in the beginning, the scope and the background and summary. And then you also see how the ALR organizes all of its legal sources that relate to the topic of the annotation and organize it by jurisdiction here. So if you're researching out of the state of Ohio, you would really focus in on these sources that have some relevance to the topic of the ALR. So I hope that helped. I think the advanced idea with the time frame will probably be a big help to most of you. Another question I was getting was about the federal statute, the Voting Rights Act. So here's what I suggest you do. You could go through statutes, right? We're on the main page of Westlaw. We're under all state and federal jurisdiction. I'm just going to go Voting Rights Act of 1965. Just that, and let's see what happens. Now, cases, right? Well, we want to find the statute. So we're in our filter mode again, right? We're shopping again. We want statutes and court rules, right? We go over here to the left for our filters. We really want to focus just on the statute. So we do that, we filter it out. Now we're just going to get statutes and court rules. And we see, here's our first statute. Looks like it's answering, the question to some extent. But here I see Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now, the federal statutory code, just like state statutory codes, has a volume dedicated to the popular name table for acts of Congress. An act of Congress means it's a statute. It's a multifaceted statute. It's going to have more than one section. It's not just a one and done. Look, here's the statute. End of story. It's a series of statutes that comprise an act. So I would click on this, and it gives us here, shows us all the different parts of the Voting Rights Act. So for purposes of citing, it gives you it right here, right? It's section, so there's 2 section symbols when there's more than one section involved. It gives you what to what, what to what, what to what. I would click on that just to, this is obviously the first of the sections. So in terms of what it's about, read A and B and summarize it. All right. So I hope this at least is helpful for a start. So any question, whether you're looking for a case, a statute, anything of the kind, that you are asked, about a specific year or time frame, I would always suggest using this advanced function for date. More times than not, I think it's helpful. Sometimes you run into a problem, it gets wonky with, dates, and it may not get you what you need. So it's important to not overuse the date stuff, but certainly, worth playing around with and seeing what works best. Okay, great.